Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'm going to talk about the subject of why it is that you should be wary of people who approve of your vices. And this is usually going to take the form, not of them saying like, I really admire the way you lie, but something along the lines of, you're okay the way you are, or you're fine the way you are, something along those lines. Something whose meaning basically, though not quite explicitly, is that you don't have to improve. There are going to be some caveats to the things that I say throughout this video. I'm going to actually put them at the end this time instead of interrupting myself. So if something seems, like hey, wait a minute, check the end first. I'm going to use as my jumping off point a scene from the movie The Princess Bride, where the Dread Pirate Roberts and Buttercup are talking with each other. And Buttercup explains why she's, lives a life of sorrow. And then the Pirate Roberts laughs at her. And then Buttercup says, "You mock my pain." And then the Dread Pirate Roberts responds, "Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who tells you differently is selling you something." Now, the Princess Bride is a comedy. You can't expect it to be perfect. And this line is not perfect. Life is not identical with suffering. Life does, however, entail suffering in the present fallen state of the world. And so the thing about suffering really is that it's not even properly avoidable. This is one of the key things about Christianity, is that suffering is so unavoidable that even God himself takes upon suffering. That there is, in fact, within Christianity a purpose to suffering, and hence the C.S. Lewis's great quote. The thing about Christianity is not so much that it did not try to explain away suffering, but that it found a use for it. That suffering can actually be redemptive, it can be positive, it can actually have value. There's also there's a rabbi whose name I'm presently forgetting, who said, that's a great quote, "The man who has not suffered, what can he possibly know anyway?" So suffering is not only inevitable, but not necessarily, in the big picture, bad. That is to say, in the moment, it is a natural evil. Suffering, that's what makes it suffering, is the fact that it is a form of natural evil. However, it can have a morally good purpose. It can be something that is, in fact, working to fix the world from its broken state. And so somebody who's trying to get rid of suffering is not looking out for your good. Again, there are caveats to this. But somebody who is simply trying to make all suffering go away doesn't want you to be fixed. Because you being fixed is inherently going to be suffering. You want something else. And this is where that great line, anyone who tells you differently is selling something. And it's not literally selling something, again, too, that's, another imperfection in it. But if you look at it, if you look at all those cases where people tell you that you don't need to improve, that you're fine the way that you are, that you should not feel bad about the things that you do wrong, those things, and much of the time, because they're not really wrong, people only don't like that you do it. It's not that it's bad, it's perfectly fine, and you know that actually it's not. And there are variations, but you can see, like everyone's got to be selfish sometimes. If they're not simply telling you that you have to actually, you do have a duty of care to yourself too. But if they're actually, if they're actually approving in that portion of your, vice of selfishness, not in a limited sense of, everyone falls down, get up again and try again, but they're literally telling you, don't try to improve, that's fine, this much selfishness is fine, it's only if you take it way too far that it really becomes a problem. They're selling you something. Metaphorically speaking. They might be literally selling you something. And actually, it's the stuff that's sort of in the middle. It's where this book, it's called Snapping. And it's an interesting book. It's not a great book by any means. I don't necessarily recommend it. But it's got a lot of research into cults. And I'm talking about the harmful cults. These sort where either there's a lot of sexual exploitation or the suicide pills get passed around at the end. And that's a surprising number of them. And one of the things that many of these cults have in common, not all of them, but many of them, is that they offer affirmation to people. They specifically go and look for people who are on the borderlands of society because people are not living their life the way they should. And they give them affirmation. They tell them that they're okay. You can find acceptance here. We're not going to reject you no matter what you do. that never turns out to be true, by the way. They generally tend to be incredibly strict. However, they're often not incredibly strict about the like particular thing that a person is feeling ostracized for. They couple it with this warm rush of acceptance, and a person thinks like, finally I found people who will accept me. I can, without changing, I can be whole. And, well, then the bad stuff comes in, usually with a period of introduction. The obvious metaphor being the lobsters in the pot, where you raise the temperature slowly so they don't crawl out. Only once it's too late do they realize what's going on. And that's the pattern for a lot of cults. Like, at first you get the acceptance and they're giving a lot to you, and then they start asking more and more from you, and then eventually they're sucking you dry. And pretty much would always turn out they either they didn't care about particular vices that members had, because they were planning to throw them out when they were done with them anyway, or they did eventually care and then just sort of used a roundabout way of totally controlling a person's life and giving them no time for their vices. It varied from cult to cult. But it's the first one that's actually kind of interesting, because you'll also see that same phenomenon, the one where you plan to use somebody for a while and then throw them out when you're done with them, where that's what gives you the opportunity to not care about their vices if you're just trying to use them. Because vices, generally speaking, cause a person to degenerate. It's the rare vice that'll just, outright kill you right at the beginning. And so, if nothing else, those ones tend to just kill you at the beginning, so you're not around for this to be relevant. But for the rest of the vices, what they do is they degenerate your life over time. Like, if you have a habit of being selfish, or if you have a habit of, just giving into anger with people and never holding back, you will drive your friends away over time. And then you'll make new friends, and then you get a little bit closer, you'll drive them away too. And then you get into a vicious cycle of something like that. And there are lots of others. Alcoholism, of course, never starts off with a person, destroying their life on day one. It's only over time, and then as they push away their safety net, and then things get worse, and then, there's often some fluctuation involved. But, it becomes, I can never keep track of your perspective, but, one of those things that looks kind of like that, where, like, there are local maximums and minimums, and things can look like they're getting better, but then they get worse, and if you don't have a good memory, you can't tell it's even worse than the last time it was bad. As it goes with alcoholism, it goes with most vices. Then there are other sorts of vices, too. Laziness is a good example, where it doesn't destroy your life in a really obvious sense, you're just wasting your life. So that what happens is, over time, when you're doing something, I'll take video games as an example, because video games are a thing that can be very good. They're artistic medium for storytelling. You can communicate truths with video games, and they're a great way to relax, too. All people need diversions in this world. But you can become addicted to video games and spend all your life with video games, and you can become really, really good at them. Again, there's just a quick caveat. I'm not talking about if you can actually make your livelihood professionally for decades off them. If you can, God bless you. For virtually everyone, you can't. And so for everyone but those people, the video game, if it's taken past the point where you're learning things from it for the rest of life, and where it's relaxing you so that you can do other things in life, but where you're actually addicted to it and just spending all your time at it, eventually at some point you're going to turn around and look and say, I didn't do anything with my life over the last 10 years. And that's a really bad place to be. But it's also just a really bad thing over that whole time to have thrown so much of your life into nothing, to have had all this time to do things with and done nothing with it. And that's the way a lot of vices work. And moreover, that's why there can be this sort of push-pull of the people who see that you're throwing your life away, hour by hour, tell you, you need to stop doing this. You need to go and, frankly, face up to the suffering that's going to be involved in doing more worthwhile things, so that you're not just spending all your time on stuff that you're going to not care about when it's over. And on the flip side, you have the people who can tell you, no, it's fine, don't worry about it, everything's great, I love you the way you are, you're great to me. And the thing is, 10 years down the road, suppose you wasted 10 years out of your life, just doing nothing but entertainment. Way, way, way in excess of anything like relaxing, not really learning any lessons from it, just nothing but entertainment, basically like a drunk, except you can actually show up to work. And you don't, tell your boss to go stuff himself on a regular basis, so you actually keep your job. Well, at the end of those 10 years, odds are very good the people who tell you, no, you're fine, I like you the way you are. Once you have problems, once you're not giving them something, and it may just be positive reinforcement to them too. There are a lot of people where what they're looking for is they'll give affirmation to get affirmation back. That the thing that they're selling to you is more. They're not looking for money. They're selling you. They're getting affirmation by giving it to you too, because affirmation is, after all, very cheap, as long as people are happy. Affirming relatively happy people is very inexpensive. You'll see the same thing all over membership in organizations, votes, money is quite a frequent one. But any one of these things, as long as the person's reasonably happy, as long as they haven't degenerated too far, then it costs relatively little to affirm them. You're making basically, more or less, this affirmation is the false promise that you're going to be there for them if things go bad. Then when eventually they degenerate and things go bad, you just throw them out like the, metaphorical old shoe. And then the person finds out that all that affirmation counted for nothing. They didn't, need the affirmation very much when everything was going fine. And now that things aren't, now that they're feeling terrible, that they've thrown away so much of their life, the only people who are still there for them are the people who've been telling them for the last 10 years that they're throwing their life away and they need to turn their life around if they're going to be happy. And so, it's a general pattern that as long as the negative effects for what you're indulging a person in take a while to show up, you can essentially milk them for all they're worth while things are still okay, and then renege on your implied promise to be there for them. Because all familial love, and this is what affirmation is aping, is a promise to be there for someone when the chips are down, when things are going badly. That's why, a friend is somebody who is going to stand by you, a true friend. Hence the distinction between the false friends and the true friends. The false friend looks like he's a friend and is there in good times, but then as soon as things go bad, he disappears. Now, you'll see this pattern absolutely everywhere. It is especially prevalent amongst the young. It's a lot less common. First off, the old are harder to fool. Again, there's some caveats on that about, I'm talking about as long as somebody hasn't hit senility, but as long as they still have their faculties, 50, 60 years of experience, you've been fooled a lot already and you've seen a lot of attempts, you're much better at not being fooled. But moreover, the young have fewer needs. The young, once you hit, say, teenagerhood, things tend to be going well. People who are at that age, by and large, they just tend to be healthy. They tend to be relatively happy. So they don't tend to have too many needs. So they're sort of ripe for milking them and letting them wreck their lives, and then walking away, once the effects have become obvious. So, that's why it's especially important for young people, for a variety of reasons, to be made aware that life involves suffering, normally. And it's the people who challenge you, the people who want you to become better, are the people who truly are your friends. Now, there's a vicious cycle here too, because people with bad parents, it's primarily the responsibility of your parents to teach you this while you're young, and people who had bad parents will not have learned this, so they're sort of especially susceptible because they won't even know this may not even know it in the abstract for that matter. They certainly won't know it in a practical sense. They'll have been, almost certainly, if they weren't raised well, they're going to have all sorts of defects that they will have acquired through bad raising, because, much of the purpose of a parent is to teach a child how to be human. If you're not going to be taught how to be human, you're going to guess, you're going to guess wrong, you're going to build up on these incorrect guesses, and all of your role models are people who know no more about life than you, since we have this society in which everyone is so incredibly stratified by age. So destructive. So there's especially sort of a double whammy there. Even worse, the people who tell them that they need to actually get better will often trigger various issues they had with their own parents. So they're really, really sort of screwed over every which way. they do also, from what I'm told, instinctively long for that sort of parental relationship, someone to tell them no, someone to tell them you actually need to improve your life. Hence, to some degree, the popularity of Jordan Peterson, who is, for many, I believe, a surrogate father figure. That's why probably the most famous thing he said, of all the things he said, is clean your room. And why is this so famous? It's, I think, because this is him epitomizing that father figure of telling somebody, no, stop having fun now, go do the thing you don't want to do now, go do it. And so that's, I think, an interesting example of that. These are going to be, I think, the people who are especially susceptible to this sort of dishonest quid pro quo. So they're the people to look out for. I don't know how to help them. It's much easier to not fall into this yourself. That you know, when you're looking at things, when you're considering things, look for ones that actually challenge you where you should be challenged. No, that's where you should be challenged. It can also go wrong the other way, of course. It is possible to find people who will tell you that there are things wrong with you when there aren't. You need to do the work of being able to, you know, forming your own conscience and being able to evaluate yourself accurately so that you can tell what you did right and what you did wrong, that you should not fix the things that are right, but you should fix the things that are wrong. That's why it's very important. And it's also very important to tell the difference, because occasionally the people who will tell you that you're just fine the way you are will come up with fake things for you to fix. I actually think that this is probably one of the big reasons for things like the cult of recycling, for example. That it you know, that you need to recycle every scrap of paper and every scrap of plastic and so on. Make sure they all get into the recycling bin. It gives you something to do. It gives you something to fix that you're probably not doing right, and it's entirely the wrong thing, almost guaranteedly. Not that there's anything wrong with recycling, but there are an astonishingly large number of more important things to do in the world than to make sure that every scrap of paper gets recycled. And, you know, make sure that you never drink bottled water and you know, those things, those fake things exist there to make you feel like there is still something for you to work on, and therefore that things are, you know, somewhat right. So this is why you need to, you know, look through things as you're evaluating, you know, various types of religions and religion substitutes. What are they actually challenging you, and are they challenging you in places where you should actually be challenged? And what are they telling you you're just fine about? And are these things that are actually sustainable to do long term? Will they actually achieve the sorts of results? Or are they going to leave you miserable and, you know, at least spiritually destitute at the end of it? Of course, if you can do that, you're not, you know, as likely to be sucked in. But in any event, these are the things that, you know, one really needs to think about in a sort of rational sense. So, yeah, I think this is already long enough. I know I always run long. So yeah, that basically, I think, is most of the caveats that I need. I'm sorry. One other caveat that I forgot, that's an important caveat, is that we all need sanity checks from time to time. You know, and to ask our friends, like, I don't think I was doing this wrong. Am I right about that? Or am I making a mistake and I was screwing up? And, you know, for a friend to tell you, no, you were right, like, it was appropriate for you to do this thing or to not do that thing in that circumstance. You made the correct judgment there. That's a different thing. That's not taking something which you can tell is a vice, which you know is a vice, and looking for somebody who is going to tell you that it's not a vice after all. This is where your conscience is pointing in a particular direction, and you're asking somebody, am I screwing up, or am I correct in what I'm doing? That's distinct from, I feel terrible because I'm doing this thing I shouldn't be doing, and then finding somebody who says, oh, no, you shouldn't feel bad about that. You should feel good about that. You should feel just fine. It's only those bigots over there who want to make you feel bad. But, you know, I accept you for who you are. That's the problem, not things like sanity checks. And you have to distinguish those two things. Because the sanity check, and, you know, a sanity check could go the other way too. Like, you know, I think that I really should have, I mean, I couldn't figure out where to get the time. I'd have let other people down if I had, you know, called called him, but I still feel like I should, like I should have called my grandfather, even though I would have been letting a bunch of other people down, and he's fine. But I still feel bad about that. And having friends say, like, no, you did the right thing in fulfilling your primary responsibilities. Your grandfather is going to understand. So that sort of thing can still happen, and that's fine. The first thing you'll notice is that this is going to be specific. It's going to be about specific things, not about like a general life orientation. Anything about general life orientation you got to do a tremendous amount of thinking about. The other thing about it too is that it's going to be something where the person can put together a rational argument from your principles why it is that the thing is in fact correct. And once they give you that rational argument should make sense to you. They're not giving you the affirmation of, oh, no, don't feel bad, I love you and I accept you. They're saying, no, you shouldn't feel bad because this was the right thing to do for reasons X, Y, and Z. That's the form of a sanity check, where a person is explaining to you the principles and the circumstances that made the thing actually good. Not where they're simply telling you, I love you, I accept you, everything's fine, because then they are replacing your conscience with them. That's really the dangerous part. Somebody who is trying to help you form your conscience in one way or another by giving you rational arguments, pretty much always fine. Maybe they're screwing up or whatever, but at least that's a reasonable relationship to be in. Somebody trying to supplant your conscience with them, that's when the danger comes in. That's when they're out for something from you. And they're looking for something from you, because nobody should ever try to be your conscience. They should only ever try to help your conscience. So, I think that's based on the particular points I hit. That's all the caveats I need. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.